Get out of my school this instant, you filthy little vagrant. Autumn Martinez felt every pair of eyes and advanced chemistry burning into her mud-stained uniform as Mrs. Enrique Smith's voice echoed through the classroom like a slap. The principal's perfectly manicured finger pointed toward the door with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something scraped off a shoe. "Ma'am, I can explain." Autumn's voice came out smaller than she intended, her hands instinctively moving to cover the dark soil stains on her white shirt. "Explain. Explain." Mrs. Enrique Smith's face flushed crimson as she stepped closer, her expensive perfume mixing toxically with the scent of disinfectant. "You walk into my prestigious academy looking like you've been rolling in a pig pen, disrupting my students' education with your poverty parade, and you think an explanation will suffice." The silence in the room was deafening. Autumn could hear Madison Chen's barely suppressed giggle from the back row, could feel Jason Rivera's sympathetic gaze burning holes in her periphery. But it was the look of pure satisfaction on Brittany Walsh's face that made her stomach turn. The same Brittany who'd accidentally bumped into Autumn's locker that morning, sending her book scattering across the hallway. "I was helping my grandmother with the—" "I don't care if you were helping the Pope plant roses." Mrs. Enrique Smith's voice reached a pitch that made several students wince. "This is Westmont Preparatory Academy, not some charity shelter for the unwashed masses. You scholarship students seem to forget that you're here on the generosity of your betters." The words hit Autumn like physical blows. Scholarship student. Unwashed masses. Your betters. Each phrase was carefully chosen, surgically precise in its cruelty. Mr. Henderson, the chemistry teacher, shifted uncomfortably behind his lab table. "Mrs. Enrique Smith, perhaps we could handle this more privately." "No." The principal whirled around, her silk scarf fluttering dramatically. "This needs to be a lesson for everyone. This is what happens when we lower our standards, when we let just anyone walk these hallowed halls." She turned back to Autumn, her cold gray eyes glittering with malicious pleasure. "Pack your things. You're expelled. Effective immediately." The classroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Autumn felt the blood drain from her face as the reality hit her. 3 years of perfect grades, 3 years of working double shifts at the diner to afford her school supplies, 3 years of proving she belonged here, gone in an instant because of mud on her clothes. "But my grandmother, she fell this morning. I had to help her get to the chickens before school, and I didn't have time to." "Save your sob story for someone who cares." Mrs. Enrique Smith's lip curled in disgust. Security. 2 uniformed guards appeared in the doorway with suspicious speed, as if they'd been waiting in the hall. Autumn's mind raced. This felt orchestrated, planned. But why? "Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description." "Mrs. Enrique Smith, please," Autumn's voice cracked as the security guards moved closer. "This school is everything to me. I've worked so hard. Hard work doesn't excuse poor hygiene and lower-class behavior." The principal's voice had gone cold now, clinical. "You simply don't belong here, Miss Martinez. Some people are born for greatness, and others." She let the sentence hang in the air like poison. As the guards flanked her, Autumn caught sight of something that made her blood freeze. Mrs. Enrique Smith was wearing a ring, a distinctive silver band with a small compass rose engraved on it. Autumn had seen that ring before, in the one photograph she had of her father. The photograph her grandmother kept hidden in the bottom of her jewelry box, the one taken 20 years ago at some fancy charity event. But that was impossible. Her father was dead. Her grandmother had told her so 1,000 times. Wait, Autumn whispered, staring at the ring. Where did you get that? Mrs. Enrique Smith's hand moved instinctively to cover the jewelry, her confident mask slipping for just a moment. In that instant, Autumn saw something she'd never seen in the principal's eyes before: fear. Get her out of here, Mrs. Enrique Smith barked to the guards, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. Now. As the security guards took her arms, Autumn's mind reeled. The ring, the orchestrated humiliation, the way Mrs. Enrique Smith had been watching her extra closely these past few weeks, suddenly nothing felt like coincidence. You know who I am, Autumn said quietly, her voice cutting through the classroom chatter like a blade. You've known all along. Mrs. Enrique Smith's face went white as parchment. You have no idea what you're talking about, you delusional little. That ring belonged to Alexander Westmont. The name left Autumn's lips before she could stop it, the name her grandmother whispered in her sleep sometimes, the name on the deed to their tiny farmhouse that Autumn wasn't supposed to know about. The classroom fell dead silent. Every student knew that name, Alexander Westmont, the tech billionaire whose family had founded their school, whose portrait hung in the main hallway, whose charitable foundation funded half the city. Mrs. Enrique Smith's composure shattered completely. Get her out. Get her out now. But as the guards dragged Autumn toward the door, she saw something that made her heart stop. There, on Mrs. Enrique Smith's desk, partially hidden under a stack of papers, was a manila folder with her full name typed on the tab, Autumn Elizabeth Martinez Westmont. The hyphenated name she'd never heard before. The name that connected her to the most powerful family in the state. As the classroom door slammed behind her, cutting off the stunned silence and erupting whispers, Autumn realized that her expulsion wasn't the end of her story at Westmont Preparatory Academy. It was just the beginning. The autumn rain hammered against the rusted roof of the school bus as Autumn pressed her face to the cold window, watching Westmont Preparatory Academy disappear behind a curtain of gray. Her reflection stared back, dark eyes still bright with unshed tears, her grandmother's stubborn chin set in defiance even as her world crumbled around her. Expelled. The word tasted like copper pennies in her mouth. 3 years of waking up at 4 a.m. to help grandmother Rosa with the chickens before catching the first bus into the city. 3 years of working at Martinez Diner until midnight, smelling like grease and coffee while her classmates posted Instagram stories from country club galas. 3 years of proving she could compete with trust fund kids who spent more on weekend shopping than her family made in a month. All destroyed because she'd chosen to help her grandmother instead of her own appearance. The bus lurched to a stop at Millfield Road, the invisible line that separated the manicured suburbs from the rural outskirts where people like her lived. As Autumn walked the quarter-mile dirt path to their farmhouse, her shoes squelching in the mud that had gotten her expelled, she tried to piece together the fragments of her shattered morning. That ring. Alexander Westmont's ring on Mrs. Enrique Smith's finger. The manila folder with the hyphenated name she'd never heard before. The way the principal's confidence had evaporated the moment Autumn mentioned the Westmont name. Their small white farmhouse came into view, its paint peeling but the garden still pristine despite the season. Grandmother Rosa sat on the front porch wrapped in her faded quilt, her weathered hands clutching a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold hours ago. At 73, she still moved like a woman half her age, except today. Today, she looked ancient. Mija, Rosa's voice carried across the yard, thick with an accent that grew stronger when she was worried. You're home early. Autumn climbed the porch steps slowly, each one feeling like a confession. They expelled me, Abuela. Rosa's coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering against the wooden planks. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence between them. What did you tell them? Rosa's voice was barely a whisper, but Autumn caught the tremor of fear underneath. Nothing. Pack. Pack for what? Autumn grabbed her grandmother's arm, feeling how thin it had become. Abuela, I saw his ring. Alexander Westmont's ring on the principal's finger. And there was a folder with my name, but it wasn't just Martinez. It was Martinez Westmont. The old woman's face crumpled, and for the first time in Autumn's memory, her indomitable grandmother looked defeated. I tried to protect you, Rosa whispered, sinking back into her chair. I tried to keep you safe, to keep you hidden. But I should have known. I should have known she would find you eventually. Who would find me? Mrs. Enrique Smith. Elena Enrique Smith. Rosa spat the name like a curse. Your father's former business partner. The woman who destroyed our family and stole everything we had. The world tilted sideways. Autumn gripped the porch railing, her knuckles white against the chipped paint. My father? But you told me he died when I was a baby. You said it was a car accident. I lied. The words fell between them like stones into deep water. I lied to protect you from the truth. Your father is Alexander Westmont, Mija. And Elena Enrique Smith has been hunting for you your entire life. Autumn's legs gave out. She collapsed into the wooden chair beside her grandmother, her mind reeling. Alexander Westmont, the billionaire tech mogul whose charitable foundation had funded her scholarship, whose family name graced half the buildings in the city, was her father. That's impossible, she breathed. The scholarship, the school, everything. The scholarship was never random, Mija. Your father has been searching for you for 16 years. The foundation, the scholarship program targeting rural students, the financial aid specifically for families in this district, it was all designed to find you. But why would Mrs. Enrique Smith want to stop that? If my father's been looking for me. Rosa's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Because Elena doesn't want Alexander to find you. She wants to find you first. The puzzle pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was a picture Autumn didn't want to see. Why? Because 16 years ago, Elena Enrique Smith embezzled $30 million from Westmont Technologies and framed your father for the theft. She destroyed his reputation, cost him his company, and when your mother tried to come forward with evidence to clear his name. Rosa's voice broke. Your mother died in what the police called a car accident 3 days before she was supposed to testify. The porch seemed to spin around Autumn. Her mother, the mother she'd never known, who Rosa had always said died in childbirth, had been murdered. I grabbed you that night and ran, Rosa continued, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. I changed our last name from Westmont to Martinez, moved us as far from the city as I could, and I've been hiding us here ever since. But Elena never stopped looking. She knew that if Alexander ever found you, if he ever learned he had a daughter, he'd start investigating your mother's death again. And this time, he might find the truth. So she became the principal at Westmont Prep, Autumn said slowly, the horrible logic clicking into place. She positioned herself to watch for me, to make sure I never got close enough to my father to reveal who you really are. Rosa nodded grimly. She's been playing a long game, Mija. 16 years of patience, waiting for you to surface. Autumn stood abruptly, pacing the small porch like a caged animal. This is insane. This is completely insane. I'm not some long-lost heiress in a fairy tale. I'm just a farm girl who works at a diner and gets good grades. You're the heir to a billion-dollar empire, Rosa said quietly. You're the key to proving your mother's murder and bringing down the woman who's destroyed so many lives. And as of this morning, Elena knows exactly who you are. The sound of car engines reached them from the main road, expensive engines, the kind that didn't belong in their neighborhood. Through the trees, Autumn could see black SUVs turning onto their dirt path. They found us, Rosa whispered, her face going pale. They found us already. But as the vehicles drew closer, Autumn realized they weren't the sleek, threatening cars she'd expected. They were luxury sedans, Mercedes, BMW, a Bentley, each one more expensive than their farmhouse. And leading the convoy was a car that made her breath catch in her throat. A silver Rolls-Royce with the distinctive Westmont Technologies logo discreetly embossed on the side. "That's not Elena's people," Rosa breathed, rising slowly from her chair. "That's..." The Rolls-Royce stopped in front of their house, and the rear door opened. A man stepped out, tall, silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than their annual grocery budget. But it was his eyes that made Autumn's heart stop. Dark brown eyes. Exactly like her own. Alexander Westmont looked across the yard at the daughter he'd been searching for his entire adult life, and Autumn saw something she'd never expected to see in a billionaire's face. Tears. "Hello, Autumn," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the distance between them. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." Behind him, more figures emerged from the other cars, security personnel, legal advisors, and someone with a camera who was definitely not corporate staff. As Autumn watched in growing alarm, she realized one of the cars had news station logos on the side. "Abuela," she whispered urgently, "why are there reporters here?" Rosa's face had gone ashen. "Because Elena called them. She's forcing the story into the open, on her terms, before Alexander could do it on his." "What does that mean?" Before Rosa could answer, another convoy of vehicles appeared at the end of their driveway. These were the black SUVs Autumn had expected, government-looking, official, threatening. And climbing out of the lead vehicle was Mrs. Enrique Smith herself, flanked by men in expensive suits who radiated lawyer energy. Elena Enrique Smith walked across the muddy farmyard in her designer heels as if she owned it, her cold smile perfectly in place as the news cameras began rolling. "Alexander," she called out sweetly, her voice carrying the poisonous charm Autumn knew all too well. "How wonderful that we could all be here for this family reunion. I'm sure the media will be fascinated to learn about your complicated relationship with the Martinez family." Alexander Westmont's jaw tightened, but his eyes never left Autumn's face. "Elena. Still dramatic as ever, I see." "Oh, this is just the opening act," Elena replied, pulling out her phone. "Wait until they hear about the trust fund that's been secretly funding this family for 16 years. The money that came from corporate accounts you definitely shouldn't have had access to. The same kind of financial irregularities that destroyed your reputation the first time." Autumn felt the blood drain from her face as she realized what was happening. Elena wasn't just revealing her identity, she was framing her father again, using Autumn's very existence as evidence of new crimes. "You see, darling," Elena said, turning to face the cameras with practiced ease, "some stories are more complicated than they appear. Some lost daughters are better left lost." As the reporters raised their cameras and microphones, Autumn realized that her expulsion from school had been the least of her problems. The real battle for her life, and her father's redemption, was just beginning. The news cameras rolled as Elena Enrique Smith positioned herself between Autumn and her father like a chess master claiming the center of the board. The October wind whipped through the farmyard, carrying the scent of rain and the electric tension of a storm about to break. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena addressed the growing crowd of reporters with the smooth confidence of someone who'd orchestrated this moment for years. "Today we witnessed the reunion of Alexander Westmont with the daughter he's been secretly funding through illegal corporate transfers. The same Alexander Westmont who was supposed to have learned his lesson about financial misconduct 16 years ago." "That's a lie," Alexander stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. But Autumn could see the trap closing around him. Every word he spoke now would be twisted, every denial used as evidence of guilt. "Is it?" Elena pulled out a tablet, swiping to display bank records with theatrical precision. Rosa Martinez has been receiving monthly payments of exactly $3,247 from Westmont Charitable Foundation for 16 years. Payments that coincidentally began 3 days after Maria Westmont's tragic death. Payments that were processed through the same shell company accounts Alexander used in his previous embezzlement scheme. Rosa grabbed Autumn's arm, her fingers digging in with desperate strength. "Mija, that money, I never knew where it came from. It just appeared in our account every month. I thought it was survivor benefits from your mother's job." Autumn's mind raced. Elena had been playing a game that spanned nearly 2 decades, setting up a financial paper trail that would destroy her father the moment she was discovered. Every dollar that had kept them afloat, every payment that had allowed Autumn to focus on school instead of working 3 jobs, it was all poisoned evidence. The beauty of it, Elena continued, turning to face the cameras with predatory satisfaction, is that Alexander probably convinced himself he was doing the right thing. Secret payments to his dead girlfriend's family. Noble, even. Except the money came from investor funds, just like before. Stop. The word left Autumn's lips before she realized she'd spoken. Every head turned toward her, reporters, lawyers, security guards, her father's stunned face, Elena's calculating smile. "Autumn, don't," Rosa whispered urgently. But something had crystallized in Autumn's mind as she watched Elena methodically destroy her father's life a second time. This wasn't just about money or corporate fraud. This was about power, control, and a woman who had built her entire identity around being untouchable. "You want to know what's really going on here?" Autumn stepped off the porch, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Elena Enrique Smith didn't just embezzle money 16 years ago. She murdered my mother to cover it up." The farmyard erupted in chaos. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions over each other. Elena's composed mask finally cracked, revealing something raw and dangerous underneath. "That's a very serious accusation from a clearly disturbed teenager," Elena said, but her voice had lost its smooth control. "Grief can make people imagine. My mother died 3 days before she was supposed to testify against you," Autumn continued, surprised by her own calm. "She had evidence that you'd been skimming money from joint ventures for years. Evidence that you destroyed my father's reputation to cover your own crimes." Alexander stepped closer, his eyes blazing with something between hope and terror. "Autumn, if you know something about Maria's death." "I know that Elena's been terrified of this moment for 16 years, Autumn said, her gaze locked on the principal's face. "She became principal at Westmont Prep specifically to watch for me. She's had access to every student file, every scholarship application, every family background check. She's been hunting me my entire life." Elena laughed, but it sounded forced now, brittle. "This is exactly the kind of delusional conspiracy thinking I'd expect from someone raised in poverty and desperation. The girl is clearly—" "Then explain the ring." The words cut through Elena's deflection like a blade. Autumn pulled out her phone, showing the picture she'd taken during chemistry class, a quick snapshot when Elena had been writing on the board, her hand clearly visible. "That's Alexander Westmont's Princeton class ring. The one that went missing from his office the night of the embezzlement. The night you cleaned out his safe and planted evidence in his computer." Elena's hand moved instinctively to cover the jewelry, but it was too late. The cameras had already captured it, the distinctive compass rose engraving clearly visible in the autumn sunlight. "How could you possibly know about?" Elena caught herself, but the damage was done. She just admitted knowing about the ring's significance. "Because my mother documented everything," Autumn said, her heart pounding as she gambled everything on a truth she'd only just begun to understand. "She kept copies of all your communications, all your financial records, all your threats. And when she died, someone made sure those documents were preserved. From the crowd of Alexander's associates, a young man stepped forward. He was probably mid-20s, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Autumn of her father. But it was the way he looked at her, with recognition, not surprise, that made her breath catch. "I preserved them," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "I've been waiting 16 years for this moment." Alexander turned to stare at the young man as if seeing a ghost. David? David Chen. Autumn's mind reeled. Chen, like Madison Chen from her chemistry class. Like the prosecutor who'd originally investigated Elena's crimes before mysteriously dropping the case. Detective Chen's son, David confirmed, pulling out a weathered briefcase that looked like it had been guarded for decades. "My father died in a car accident 6 months after your mother was killed, Autumn. But not before he gave me everything he'd collected about Elena and Enrique Smith. Everything he'd hidden when the case was shut down from above." Elena's face had gone white as marble. "This is ridiculous. You can't seriously believe." Cancelled bank transfers that were reactivated after business hours, David continued, opening the briefcase to reveal meticulously organized files. "Security footage from your office building showing you there at 3 a.m. the night of the embezzlement. Phone records showing calls between you and certain city officials who suddenly became very interested in closing Maria Westmont's investigation. And," he said, pulling out a small digital recorder, "audio evidence of you threatening my father when he got too close to the truth." Elena's composure shattered completely. She lunged toward David, but Alexander's security team was faster, stepping between them with professional efficiency. "You have no idea what you're messing with," Elena snarled, her mask of civility completely gone. "No idea how deep this goes or who you're really fighting." "Then tell us," Autumn said, stepping closer despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "Tell us why my mother had to die. Tell us why you've spent 16 years destroying innocent lives." For a moment, Elena looked genuinely lost, as if the question had stripped away layers of justification she'd built up over the years. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more human. "Because I loved him first," she whispered, staring at Alexander with something that might have been heartbreak under all the rage. "I built that company with him. I sacrificed everything, my marriage, my reputation, my ethics, to make Westmont Technologies successful. And then Maria showed up with her journalism degree and her moral high ground, and suddenly I was invisible." The revelation hit like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money or power, it was about a woman whose love had curdled into something poisonous over 2 decades of rejection. "So you destroyed us," Alexander said quietly, his voice heavy with a grief that went beyond simple betrayal. "You destroyed Maria, destroyed me, destroyed our daughter's entire childhood, because you couldn't accept that I didn't love you back." "I would have made you happy," Elena said, tears streaming down her face for the first time since Autumn had known her. "I would have given you everything. But you chose her, you chose perfect, noble Maria who was going to expose every compromise we'd made to build our empire." "Those weren't my compromises," Alexander replied. "I never knew about the embezzlement, Elena. I never knew about the bribes or the threats or the—" "Of course you didn't." Elena's voice rose to a shriek. "You got to be the golden boy with clean hands while I did all the dirty work. And when it all came crashing down, who do you think took the fall? Who do you think spent the last 16 years rebuilding from nothing while you played philanthropist with your guilt money?" The truth was worse than Autumn had imagined. Elena hadn't just been a criminal, she'd been a woman in love who'd convinced herself that her crimes were acts of devotion, that her betrayals were justified sacrifices for a man who'd never asked for any of it. "But now it's over," David said firmly, holding up the recorder. "All of it. The evidence my father died protecting, combined with what we can prove today, it's enough to put you away forever." Elena looked around the farmyard, at the reporters still filming, at the security guards closing in, at Alexander's face full of disgust and pity. For the first time since Autumn had known her, the principal looked truly defeated. "You think this ends anything?" she asked, her voice returning to its cold calculation even as tears continued to fall. "You think exposing me solves your problems? You have no idea what you've just unleashed." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a contact that made Autumn's blood freeze when she saw the name, Senator Morrison, emergency. "Hello, Senator," Elena said sweetly as the call connected, her speakerphone letting everyone hear. "I'm afraid the Westmont situation has gotten out of hand." "Yes, sir. I think it's time to implement the contingency plan we discussed." "All of it." The line went dead, and Elena's smile returned, cold, triumphant, and absolutely terrifying. "You see, darling," she said to Autumn, "when you've been playing this game as long as I have, you don't just have one backup plan. You have backup plans for your backup plans. And some secrets are too dangerous for any of us to survive." As if summoned by her words, the sound of helicopters began to echo across the October sky, not news helicopters, but military ones. The kind that didn't come to preserve evidence or protect witnesses. The kind that came to eliminate problems. Autumn grabbed David's hand instinctively as the helicopters grew louder, realizing that exposing Elena's crimes hadn't been her victory. It had been the moment Elena decided that if she was going down, she was taking everyone with her. The first helicopter crested the tree line like a mechanical predator, its rotors whipping the autumn leaves into a frenzied tornado around the farmyard. Autumn felt David's hand tighten around hers as they pressed against the side of Alexander's Rolls-Royce, using the luxury sedan as cover from whatever was coming. "Everyone stay calm," Alexander called out, but his voice carried the tension of a man who'd survived one corporate assassination attempt and recognized the signs of another. "These are federal aircraft. They're not supposed to." The helicopter spotlight blazed to life, pinning them all in harsh white light that turned the gathering dusk into artificial day. But it wasn't a rescue beam, it was a targeting beam, and the men rappelling down from the aircraft weren't wearing FBI badges. They were wearing the black tactical gear of private military contractors. "Move!" David shouted, pulling Autumn toward the farmhouse as the first shots rang out, not lethal rounds, but tranquilizer darts that thudded into the ground where they'd been standing moments before. "They want us alive," Alexander realized, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and terror. "Elena needs us alive for whatever she's planning." "Not all of us," Rosa called from the porch, her weathered face grim with understanding. "They only need Autumn and Alexander alive. Everyone else is expendable." The old woman was already moving with surprising agility, grabbing a hunting rifle from inside the farmhouse door. At 73, Rosa Martinez still moved like the woman who'd once been Maria Westmont's bodyguard, a detail she'd never mentioned to her granddaughter. "Abuela, what are you?" "Protecting my family," Rosa said simply, chambering around. "Something I should have done 16 years ago instead of running." David pushed Autumn through the farmhouse door as the tactical team spread across the yard, their movements professional and coordinated. These weren't government agents, they were mercenaries, the kind of people who made problems disappear permanently. "The root cellar," Rosa directed, leading them through the small kitchen toward a trapdoor Autumn had never noticed beneath the worn linoleum. "It connects to the old mine shaft. You can get to the main road without being seen." "I'm not leaving you," Autumn protested, but Rosa was already pushing her toward the hidden entrance. "You're not leaving me, Mija. You're finishing what your mother started." Rosa pressed something into Autumn's hand, a small key that felt warm from being clutched against her grandmother's heart. "This opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box 1247. Your mother left you something there. Something Elena would kill for." Outside, the sound of boots on wooden steps echoed through the house. The mercenaries had reached the porch. "Go," Alexander whispered urgently, but he was looking at David, not Autumn. Protect her. Get her to the bank. Whatever's in that box, it's what Elena's really afraid of. David nodded, but as he guided Autumn toward the cellar entrance, she caught something in the exchange between the two men. They knew each other. Not just from today, from before. You're not David Chen, she realized, even as he helped her down into the narrow underground passage. Detective Chen's son would be older. You're David Westmont, he admitted quietly, his voice echoing in the confined space. Your half-brother. Dad's son from before he met your mother. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Half-brother. Not a potential romantic interest, but family she'd never known existed. The way he'd looked at her with recognition, the way Alexander had trusted him immediately, it all made horrible sense. Why didn't you tell me? Because Elena's been watching our family for 16 years, David replied, leading her through the tunnel system that Rosa had somehow carved out or maintained beneath their property. She knows about me. She's been waiting for me to surface just like she was waiting for you. If we'd revealed our connection too early. The sound of gunfire erupted above them, muffled by earth and wooden beams but unmistakably violent. Rosa's hunting rifle answered with sharp cracks that seemed to shake the tunnel walls. Abuela. Autumn tried to turn back, but David caught her arm. She's buying us time, he said firmly. Don't waste her sacrifice. They crawled through the narrow passage in tense silence, following a route that Rosa had clearly planned and prepared for exactly this scenario. Emergency supplies were stacked at regular intervals, water, first aid kits, even changes of clothes that would help them blend in once they reached the main road. How long has she been preparing for this? Autumn whispered. Since the day she took you from the hospital, David replied. Rosa Martinez wasn't just your grandmother, Autumn. She was Maria Westmont's security consultant. Former Special Forces. She's the one who helped our parents hide the evidence that Elena's been trying to destroy. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Her tough, resilient grandmother who'd always seemed to know exactly what to do in any crisis, who taught Autumn how to shoot and how to fight and how to disappear, she'd been a professional protector all along. They reached the end of the tunnel system, emerging into a small cave that opened onto a hillside overlooking the main highway. Below them, Autumn could see the news vans and police cars that had been drawn by the sound of gunfire, but also more black SUVs arriving with reinforcements. Elena's escalating, David observed grimly. She's not trying to hide anymore. She's going for total control. What does that mean? David pulled out his phone, showing her a news alert that had just appeared. Breaking, fugitive billionaire Alexander Westmont taken into federal custody following armed standoff at rural farmhouse. Autumn's blood turned to ice. That's not what happened. Elena controls the narrative now, David explained. By the time the real story comes out, Dad will be dead in federal custody and you'll have disappeared permanently. The evidence we have won't matter if there's no one left alive to present it. The sound of helicopters was growing closer again, and Autumn realized they weren't safe yet. Elena's mercenaries were sweeping the area systematically, and it was only a matter of time before they found the tunnel exit. The bank, Autumn said, clutching the key Rosa had given her. Whatever Mom left there, it has to be important enough to risk everything for. First National is 20 miles from here, David said, studying the terrain below them. We'd have to get through Elena's roadblocks, past whatever federal agencies she's corrupted, and into a secure facility that's probably already being watched. So it's impossible. Not impossible, David said, his face lighting up with something that looked disturbingly like his father's calculating smile. Just incredibly dangerous. He pulled out his phone again, but this time he was making a call. Madison? It's David. I need that favor you owe me. Autumn's heart stopped. Madison Chen. From my chemistry class. My cousin, David confirmed as the call connected. And the daughter of the only honest federal prosecutor in the state. Madison. We need an extraction, and we need it now. Within minutes, a motorcycle appeared on the highway below them, not a standard bike, but a high-performance machine that looked like it could outrun anything Elena's people were driving. The rider was small, feminine, and when she pulled off her helmet, Autumn saw Madison Chen's familiar face looking up at them. This feels like a trap, Autumn said as they prepared to climb down to the road. Everything feels like a trap when you're being hunted by people with unlimited resources, David replied. The trick is to spring the trap on your own terms. They made it to the motorcycle without being spotted, but as Madison gunned the engine and they sped toward the city, Autumn caught sight of something that made her stomach drop. In the distance, smoke was rising from the direction of their farmhouse, not the gray smoke of gunfire, but the black smoke of a structure burning. They torched it, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she watched her childhood home disappear behind them. They burned everything. Not everything, Madison called back over the engine noise. Your grandmother got out. She's in federal protective custody, the real kind, not Elena's fake version. Relief flooded through Autumn, but it was mixed with a growing sense of urgency. Elena was destroying evidence, eliminating witnesses, and controlling the narrative with ruthless efficiency. Whatever was in that safety deposit box might be their only chance to stop her. First National Bank rose before them like a fortress of glass and steel, its modern architecture a stark contrast to the rural farmhouse they'd fled. But as they approached, Autumn realized something was wrong. The parking lot was full of black SUVs, and men in suits were stationed at every entrance. She's already here, David said grimly. Elena's people are inside. How is that possible? Autumn demanded. How could she know about the safety deposit box? Madison pulled the motorcycle into an alley beside the bank, her face pale with realization. Because Senator Morrison isn't just Elena's political contact. He's on the bank's board of directors. He has access to all the records. They were trapped. Elena knew about the evidence, knew where it was hidden, and had beaten them to the prize. Everything they'd sacrificed, Rosa's farmhouse, Alexander's freedom, their own safety, had been for nothing. But as Autumn stared up at the bank building, she noticed something that made her heart race with sudden hope. On the 5th floor, a light was flashing in a specific pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. Someone's up there, she breathed. Someone's still fighting. David followed her gaze and smiled grimly. That's not just someone. That's our inside man. What inside man? The one person Elena would never suspect of betraying her, David said, pulling out his phone to dial a number he clearly had memorized. The person who's been playing the longest game of all. The call connected, and a familiar voice answered, calm, professional, and completely unexpected. Hello, David, said Mr. Henderson, Autumn's chemistry teacher. I've been waiting for your call. And I have something Elena wants very, very badly. As Autumn stared up at the flashing light, she realized that her expulsion from Westmont Preparatory Academy hadn't been the beginning of her story. It had been the end of Elena's. The bank service elevator shuddered to a halt on the 5th floor, and Autumn felt her stomach drop for reasons that had nothing to do with the mechanical motion. Everything about this felt wrong. The too easy access through the maintenance entrance, the convenient absence of security cameras in the service corridors, the way Mr. Henderson had known exactly which routes to avoid. This way, Madison whispered, leading them through a maze of administrative offices toward the flashing light they'd seen from the street. But Autumn noticed something that made her skin crawl. Madison moved through the building like she'd been here before, navigating the layout with practiced familiarity. How do you know where you're going? Autumn asked quietly. Madison's step faltered for just a moment. David gave me the building plans before we came in. But David shook his head, his expression growing puzzled. No, I didn't. I've never been inside this building before. The silence that followed was deafening. In that instant, Autumn realized they were walking into something far worse than a trap. They were walking into the culmination of a deception that had been years in the making. They reached the office where the light had been flashing, and Mr. Henderson stood at the window with his back to them. But when he turned around, the warm, encouraging teacher Autumn had known for 3 years was gone. In his place was a man whose cold smile matched Elena Enrique Smith's perfectly. "Hello, Autumn," he said, his voice carrying none of the kindness she remembered. "I'm glad you could make it. We have so much to discuss." "Mr. Henderson?" Autumn's voice came out small and confused. "What's going on?" "David said you were helping us." "David said what I told him to say," Mr. Henderson replied, settling into the chair behind the desk like he owned it. "Just like he's done everything I've told him to do for the past 3 years. The words hit Autumn like a physical blow. She turned to stare at David, searching his face for some sign that this was all an elaborate misdirection, some complex plan to fool their enemies. But what she saw in his eyes was worse than guilt. It was pity. "I'm sorry, Autumn," David said quietly. "I really am. But you have to understand, this was always bigger than just you and your father." "What are you talking about?" Autumn backed toward the door, but Madison stepped into her path, no longer the helpful classmate but a guard ensuring she couldn't escape. "Sit down, Autumn," Mr. Henderson said gently, his teacher voice returning for a moment. "Let me explain how this really works." "I don't want to sit down. I want to leave. I want to find my grandmother and my father Anne." "Your grandmother is dead," Mr. Henderson said with clinical precision. "She died in the farmhouse fire 23 minutes ago. The person you spoke to on David's phone was Madison, using voice modulation software." The room tilted sideways. Autumn felt the breath leave her lungs as if she'd been punched. Rosa, her fierce, protective, indomitable grandmother, was gone. The woman who'd raised her, taught her, loved her unconditionally, had died believing Autumn was safe. "You're lying," she whispered, but she could see the truth in their faces. "You're lying. She got out," Madison said. "Madison says what we need her to say," Mr. Henderson continued remorselessly. "Just like David does what we need him to do. Just like your father has been doing what we need him to do for 16 years without even realizing it." Autumn sank into the chair, her legs no longer able to support her. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. You're 16 years old, and you've been living in a carefully constructed fantasy your entire life." Mr. Henderson pulled out a tablet, swiping to display documents that made Autumn's vision blur. "Let me show you who you really are." The first document was a birth certificate, not hers, but someone named Autumn Elizabeth Morrison. Born the same day, same hospital, but to completely different parents. "Senator Morrison isn't just Elena's political contact," Mr. Henderson explained with the patience of a teacher walking through a difficult concept. "He's your biological father. Elena Enrique Smith is your biological mother." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. Autumn stared at the document, trying to process information that shattered everything she'd believed about herself. "That's impossible. My mother was Maria Westmont. My father is Alexander." Maria Westmont was a journalist who got too close to the truth about a complex intelligence operation, Mr. Henderson continued. Alexander Westmont was a useful businessman who provided cover for a network that went far beyond simple corporate embezzlement. "And you, Autumn, are the daughter of the 2 people who've been running that network for the past 20 years. He swiped to the next document, adoption papers showing that Maria and Alexander had taken custody of an infant girl whose birth parents had died in a car accident. Except the parents weren't dead, and the car accident had never happened. Elena didn't murder Maria Westmont, Mr. Henderson said, watching Autumn's face with scientific interest. Elena is Maria Westmont. She's been playing both roles for 16 years, waiting for the right moment to reclaim her daughter and eliminate the witnesses to her true identity. Autumn felt reality fracturing around her like glass. The woman who'd expelled her, who'd humiliated her, who'd orchestrated this entire nightmare, was her mother. But Rosa knew her. Rosa worked with Maria, she protected her. Rosa Martinez was a federal agent whose job was to monitor Alexander Westmont and ensure his continued cooperation with our operation, David said, his voice carrying genuine regret. She was never your grandmother, Autumn. She was your handler. The betrayals were coming too fast, each one more devastating than the last. Rosa hadn't loved her, she'd been paid to watch her. David wasn't her brother, he was her jailer. Everything she believed about her identity, her family, her purpose, had been lies layered on top of lies. Why? The word came out as a sob. Why would you do this? Why would you create such an elaborate? Because you're not just Elena's daughter, Mr. Henderson said, his voice growing gentle again in a way that made Autumn's skin crawl. You're the key to the largest intelligence operation in U.S. history. Your DNA, your biometric data, your psychological profile, it was all designed to give you access to systems and information that no other person on Earth can reach. He showed her another document, this one covered in technical specifications and genetic markers that meant nothing to her. But at the bottom, in simple English, was a phrase that made her blood freeze: subject demonstrates 99.7% compatibility with Prometheus Protocol activation. Prometheus Protocol. A program designed to insert a deep cover agent into the highest levels of American society, Madison explained, her voice taking on the clinical tone of someone reciting from memory. Your entire life has been a training exercise, Autumn. Every challenge you faced, every person you've met, every emotion you've felt, it was all carefully calibrated to shape you into the perfect intelligence asset. Autumn looked around the room at the three people she trusted most, seeing them clearly for the first time. Mr. Henderson wasn't a teacher, he was a handler. Madison wasn't a classmate, she was surveillance. David wasn't family, he was her control agent. The scholarship to Westmont Prep, the financial struggles that made you resourceful, the social isolation that made you observant, the academic pressure that made you analytical, all of it was designed to create someone who could infiltrate any environment and extract any information without arousing suspicion. But I never agreed to any of this, Autumn whispered. I never chose to be part of your operation. Children don't choose their destinies, Elena's voice said from the doorway, and Autumn turned to see her biological mother entering the room with a smile that mixed maternal pride with predatory satisfaction. They're shaped by them. Elena, no, Maria, no, whoever she really was, had changed out of her principal's attire into something that looked more like military dress. The transformation was complete, and Autumn realized she was seeing her mother's true face for the first time. Hello, darling, Elena said, moving to embrace her daughter. I know this is overwhelming, but you have to understand, everything we've done has been to protect you, to prepare you for something far more important than the small life you thought you wanted. Autumn jerked away from the attempted embrace, her chair scraping against the floor. Stay away from me. I understand you're upset, Elena said with infinite patience. But you're about to learn why your existence matters more than any personal feelings or attachments. Tomorrow morning, you're going to walk into the Pentagon as part of a student tour group. You're going to access a specific computer terminal. And you're going to download information that will prevent a war that would kill millions of people. I won't do it. Yes, you will, Elena said with absolute certainty. Because if you don't, David will die. If you don't, Alexander will die. If you don't, every person you've ever cared about will suffer consequences you can't imagine. She gestured to Mr. Henderson, who turned his tablet to show live video feeds from multiple locations. Alexander in a prison cell, clearly drugged and barely conscious. A middle-aged woman Autumn recognized as Madison's mother, bound and gagged in what looked like a warehouse. A dozen other faces, teachers, classmates, even the elderly man who ran the corner store near the diner where she'd worked. "We have everyone, Autumn," Elena said softly. "Everyone whose life might motivate you to resist us. Their survival depends entirely on your cooperation." Autumn stared at the screens, watching people she cared about suffering because of her existence, because of choices she'd never made, because of an identity that had been thrust upon her before she was old enough to understand what it meant. "This is what you call love?" she asked, looking at the woman who'd given birth to her. "This is what you call protecting me?" "This is what I call preparing you for reality," Elena replied. "The world is full of people who will use you, Autumn. At least we're honest about it." As Autumn sat in that sterile office, surrounded by lies and threats and the wreckage of everything she'd believed about herself, she realized that her expulsion from school had been the least devastating thing to happen to her. The most devastating thing was learning that she'd never really existed at all, just a carefully constructed weapon in someone else's war. And tomorrow, that weapon was going to be fired whether she wanted it to be or not. The safe house was a sterile apartment in downtown Washington, D.C., where Autumn spent the longest night of her life staring at ceiling tiles and trying to find a way out of an impossible situation. Elena had left her with David and Madison as guards, or babysitters, or handlers, she no longer knew what to call them, while she finalized the arrangements for tomorrow's mission. The Pentagon. A student tour group. A computer terminal. Information that would allegedly prevent a war. Or maybe information that would start one. At this point, Autumn had no reason to believe anything Elena told her was true. "You should eat something," Madison said, setting a plate of sandwiches on the coffee table. Her voice carried the same false concern it always had, but now Autumn could hear the calculation underneath. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "I'm not hungry," Autumn replied, her voice flat and empty. She felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped everything that made her herself and left only an echo. David sat in the chair across from her, studying her face with the kind of clinical attention a scientist might give to a lab specimen. "You're thinking about running," he observed. "You're trying to figure out if there's a way to save everyone without doing what Elena wants. Wouldn't you?" "I thought about it once," David admitted. "When I was about your age, when I first understood what I really was. They told me my parents had died in a car accident, that I was an orphan who'd been chosen for a special program. It took me 3 years to learn that my parents were alive and being held in a facility in Nevada." Autumn looked at him sharply. This was the first time he'd volunteered personal information that felt genuine. "What happened to them?" "I cooperated. I did exactly what they asked me to do for 7 years. I infiltrated youth organizations, student governments, eventually college political groups. I fed them information about potential recruits, about security vulnerabilities, about people who might be useful or dangerous to their operations." "And your parents?" David's smile was bitter as winter. "They died in a car accident 6 months ago. For real this time. It turns out that once you've outlived your usefulness as leverage, there's no reason to keep people alive." The words hit Autumn like ice water. Even if she cooperated, even if she did everything Elena wanted, the people she cared about would still die eventually. They were all just temporary motivations, disposed of once they'd served their purpose. "So there really is no way out," she whispered. "There's always a way out," Madison said quietly, and something in her voice made both Autumn and David look at her sharply. "The question is whether you're willing to pay the price." "What price?" Madison pulled out her phone, showing them a text message that had arrived 20 minutes ago, package secured. Await instructions. I've been in contact with someone Elena doesn't know about, Madison continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Someone who's been tracking this operation for years, waiting for the right moment to bring it down. Autumn felt a flicker of hope, quickly crushed by suspicion. Another lie. Another manipulation. My real father, Madison said simply. Not the prosecutor they told you about. My father is James Chen, senior analyst at the NSA. He's been investigating the Prometheus protocol since before you were born. She showed them another message, daughter confirmed safe. Extraction possible but requires full cooperation from Asset A. Asset A. That's what they called her now, not even a name, just a designation. He can get you out, Madison continued urgently. But you have to do exactly what he says, when he says it. And you have to accept that some people can't be saved. What do you mean? Your father, Alexander, is being held at a black site facility that we can't breach without triggering a security protocol that would kill him instantly. The others Elena showed you on those screens, most of them are already dead. She was showing you old footage, archived videos from previous operations. The hope that had flickered to life died instantly. Rosa? Really dead? I'm sorry. Alexander? Alive, but unreachable. For now. Autumn closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of her losses. Her grandmother was gone. Her father was beyond help. The people she'd thought she could save were already beyond saving. Then what's the point, she asked, opening her eyes to stare at Madison. What's the point of any of this if everyone dies anyway? Because Elena isn't just running one operation, David said, his voice heavy with the weight of years of hidden knowledge. Prometheus is just the beginning. She's been building a network of people like us, children raised as weapons, adults manipulated as assets, and tomorrow's mission isn't about preventing a war. It's about starting one. He pulled out his own phone, showing them classified documents he'd somehow accessed. The information you're supposed to download from the Pentagon? It's not intelligence about enemy plans. It's the complete list of American undercover operatives in China, Russia, and Iran. Elena's going to sell that list to the highest bidder, and within a week, dozens of American agents will be dead. But why would she want to start a war? Because wars are profitable, Madison explained grimly. Elena's not just an intelligence operative, she's a broker. She sells information, weapons, and influence to anyone willing to pay. A new war would make her network indispensable to all sides. Autumn felt the last of her illusions crumble. This wasn't about patriotism or national security or protecting innocent lives. It was about money and power, and she was just another commodity to be traded. So my choice is to be responsible for the deaths of American agents, or be responsible for the deaths of people I care about. No, Madison said firmly. Your choice is to trust us enough to help us destroy Elena's entire operation. Tonight. She stood up, moving to the window and checking the street below with practiced caution. My father's team is in position. They've been tracking Elena's communications, mapping her network, identifying her assets. But they need someone on the inside, someone Elena trusts, to plant a virus in her main server. That someone being me. Elena's taking you to her command center before the Pentagon mission. You'll have access to her computer systems for approximately 15 minutes while she briefs you on the final details. That's our window. David leaned forward, his expression intense. It's not just about stopping tomorrow's mission, Autumn. If we can download Elena's complete files, we can identify every person she's manipulated, every operation she's running, every politician and military officer she's corrupted. We can save dozens of people like us and prevent future operations like Prometheus. And if I get caught? The silence stretched between them like a gulf. If you get caught, Madison said finally, Elena will kill you slowly and publicly, and then she'll disappear forever. The network will continue under new leadership, and everything we've sacrificed will be for nothing. Autumn stared out the window at the DC skyline, seeing the lights of government buildings where people were making decisions that would affect millions of lives. For 16 years, she'd been a pawn in someone else's game. Now she had the chance to become a player herself, but only by risking everything she had left. There's something else, David said quietly. Something Madison and I haven't told you yet. Autumn turned back to them, unsure she could handle another revelation. Elena's planning to eliminate both of us tonight, he continued. We've served our purpose as your handlers, and now we know too much about the operation. The extraction team that's supposed to take you to the command center. They have orders to dispose of us on the way. How do you know that? Madison held up her phone, showing an encrypted message she'd intercepted. Because I've been monitoring Elena's communications since yesterday. She never intended for any of us to survive this. The apartment fell silent except for the distant hum of DC traffic. Autumn realized that her choice wasn't really between saving strangers or saving people she cared about. It was between dying as Elena's weapon or dying as her own person. If I do this, she said slowly, if I help you plant this virus and download Elena's files, what happens to Alexander? We don't know, Madison admitted. Maybe my father's team can locate and extract him once we have Elena's complete operational files. Maybe not. But if we don't try, he's definitely going to die anyway. And you too? We're dead either way, David said with a shrug that was probably meant to look casual but came across as heartbreaking. At least this way, our deaths might mean something. Autumn looked at these two people who'd manipulated her, lied to her, and guided her into this nightmare, but who were also, she realized, victims of the same system that had destroyed her life. They'd been children once, too, before Elena's network had claimed them. Okay, she said quietly. Tell me what I need to do. For the next 3 hours, they planned. Madison's father provided detailed schematics of Elena's command center, technical specifications for the virus that would destroy her network, and extraction routes that might get them out alive. But as dawn approached, Autumn found herself thinking not about escape routes or computer viruses or international conspiracies. She thought about Rosa teaching her to shoot tin cans off fence posts. About Alexander's face when he'd recognized her in the farmyard. About the simple life she'd thought she'd wanted, working at the diner and going to college and maybe falling in love with someone who wasn't her handler. All of that was gone now, burned away in the fire that had consumed her grandmother's farmhouse and the truth that had consumed her identity. What remained was a choice between different kinds of death, and the slim possibility that her death might prevent others. As the first light of morning touched the Washington skyline, Autumn realized she'd stopped hoping for survival. Now she was just hoping for meaning. It would have to be enough. The command center was hidden beneath a brownstone in Georgetown that looked like any other expensive DC residence. But as Elena led Autumn down 3 flights of stairs into what should have been a basement, the space opened into a technological nerve center that belonged in a spy thriller, not a residential neighborhood. Dozens of monitors displayed maps, satellite feeds, encrypted communications, and data streams that painted a real-time picture of intelligence operations across 6 continents. Technicians worked at specialized terminals with the focused intensity of people who knew that mistakes could start wars. Impressive, isn't it? Elena said, her voice carrying maternal pride as she watched Autumn take in the scope of the operation. Your mother built all of this. Not Elena Enrique Smith, not Maria Westmont, but the woman who chose to become whoever the world needed her to be. Autumn tried to maintain the compliance she'd performed all morning, but seeing the vast scope of Elena's network made her stomach turn. How many people work for you? Work for me? Oh, darling, you still don't understand. Elena laughed, settling into the central command chair like a queen claiming her throne. I don't run this operation. I am this operation. Every asset, every agent, every politician and military officer and intelligence analyst, they're all extensions of me. She gestured to the monitors showing operations in progress around the world. When a terrorist cell in Syria receives funding, that's me. When a drug cartel in Colombia gets intelligence about DEA operations, that's me. When a senator in Washington receives compromising photographs of his opponent, that's me. You're talking about treason on a massive scale. I'm talking about evolution, Elena corrected, her voice taking on the fervent tone of a true believer. Nation-states are obsolete, Autumn. Borders are meaningless. The old concepts of patriotism and loyalty are chains that hold humanity back from its true potential. She stood, moving to a wall display that showed financial transactions flowing between accounts across dozens of countries. I've created something beyond governments, beyond ideologies, beyond the petty tribal thinking that's defined human conflict for millennia. I've created a true meritocracy where information, influence, and power flow to those intelligent enough to claim them. Autumn forced herself to nod, to look impressed rather than horrified. But inside, she was calculating distances to the central server, memorizing security protocols, looking for the opening Madison had promised would come. And you want me to be part of this? I want you to lead this, Elena said, her eyes blazing with ambition that transcended normal maternal expectations. Everything I've built has been for you, Autumn. Every operation, every sacrifice, every necessary cruelty, it was all to create a world worthy of your capabilities. A technician approached with a tablet, speaking in rapid Russian that Autumn somehow understood perfectly. Another gift from her engineered genetics, she realized, she'd been programmed to comprehend multiple languages without conscious learning. The Pentagon infiltration is confirmed for 1,400 hours, Elena translated unnecessarily. Your tour group clearances have been finalized, and the target terminal has been isolated from external monitoring. This was it, the moment Madison had described, when Elena would leave her alone with the computer systems to review final mission parameters. Autumn felt for the small device hidden in her sleeve, the virus that would allegedly destroy Elena's network from within. But as Elena moved toward the exit, she paused, her hand resting on Autumn's shoulder with something that might have been genuine affection. I know this is overwhelming, she said softly. I know you probably hate me right now for the deceptions, for the manipulations, for taking away the simple life you thought you wanted. But someday you'll understand that love sometimes requires terrible choices. Like murdering my grandmother. Elena's face hardened. Rosa Martinez was a federal agent whose job was to monitor and control you. Her death was necessary to complete your psychological preparation for today's mission. Psychological preparation. Isolation, desperation, the stripping away of all external support systems, these are required steps in activating a Prometheus asset. You needed to reach the point where you had nothing left to lose before you could become everything you were designed to be. The casual way Elena discussed Rosa's murder, the clinical precision with which she'd orchestrated Autumn's psychological destruction, made something snap inside her. For 16 years, Autumn had been polite, compliant, eager to please. She'd absorbed every cruelty, every humiliation, every manipulation because she believed that being good would somehow earn her the love and acceptance she craved. But standing in this underground nerve center, listening to her biological mother describe murder as a necessary parenting technique, Autumn finally understood what she needed to become. Someone who fought back. You're right, she said quietly, watching Elena's face light up with satisfaction. I do understand now. Elena smiled, a genuine expression that made her look almost human. I knew you would. Intelligence always wins over emotion, given enough pressure. Now, review the mission parameters while I coordinate with our Pentagon contacts. You have 15 minutes. The moment Elena left the room, Autumn moved to the central terminal, her hands flying over the keyboard with skills she didn't remember learning. But instead of immediately planting Madison's virus, she accessed Elena's personal files, searching for information about Alexander's location. What she found made her blood freeze. Alexander Westmont wasn't being held at a black site facility. He was here, in this building, in a medical bay 2 floors below the command center. But according to the files, he wasn't a prisoner, he was a patient. The drugs they'd given him weren't sedatives for compliance, they were experimental medications designed to repair 16 years of psychological damage. Because Alexander Westmont had been Elena's first Prometheus asset. The man she'd thought was her father, the billionaire philanthropist who'd been searching for his lost daughter, was actually another engineered weapon who'd been programmed to believe in his own fictional identity. The corporate empire, the charitable foundation, the desperate search for his murdered girlfriend's child, all of it had been implanted memories, artificial motivations designed to make him the perfect cover for Elena's operations. And now Elena was repairing him, stripping away the Alexander Westmont identity to reveal whatever he'd been before his programming began. Autumn's hands shook as she scrolled through more files, each revelation worse than the last. David wasn't her half-brother, he was another Prometheus asset, programmed to believe he was Alexander's son to make his handler role more psychologically convincing. Madison wasn't a reluctant ally, she was Elena's prototype, a first-generation asset whose apparent rebellion was actually part of a complex test of Autumn's loyalty. Even James Chen, Madison's supposedly real father, was Elena's creation. The NSA analyst, the rescue operation, the virus Autumn was supposed to plant, it was all another layer of manipulation designed to make her feel like she was choosing resistance when she was actually choosing deeper compliance. Discovering the truth about your support systems, I see. Autumn spun around to find Elena standing in the doorway, no longer bothering to hide her satisfied smile. How long have you been watching? The entire time, darling. Did you really think I'd leave you alone with my most sensitive data without monitoring every keystroke? Elena approached slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. But I'm proud of you for trying. It shows exactly the kind of initiative I was hoping to see. You wanted me to find out about Alexander. About David and Madison. I wanted you to understand the scope of what I've built, Elena confirmed. And I wanted you to realize that resistance is futile not because I'm too powerful to defeat, but because there's nothing outside my control to resist. She gestured to the monitors around them. Every person you've ever cared about, every authority figure you might appeal to, every potential ally who might offer help, they're all mine, Autumn. I created them, programmed them, and positioned them in your life precisely when you'd need them most. Rosa too. Rosa was the most complex programming I ever attempted, Elena said with something that sounded like genuine regret. I needed someone who could love you authentically while still serving my purposes. The emotional conditioning required to create that kind of conflicted loyalty was extensive. Autumn felt the last foundations of her reality crumble. Even Rosa's love had been programmed, engineered, manufactured to serve Elena's psychological manipulation. So there's nothing real, she whispered. Nothing genuine in my entire life. There's one thing, Elena said, moving to stand directly in front of her daughter. The choice you're about to make. Right now, in this moment, you can choose to become the weapon I created you to be, or you can choose to destroy everything I've built and die in the process. She gestured to the computer terminal. The virus Madison gave you is real, it will destroy my network, expose my operations, and save countless lives. But activating it will also trigger a dead man's switch that will eliminate every Prometheus asset still alive, including Alexander, including David, including you. And if I don't activate it? You complete today's mission, accept your role as my successor, and live to see a world where intelligence and efficiency triumph over chaos and sentiment. You'll have power beyond imagination, influence across every continent, and the satisfaction of knowing you've helped evolution take its next step. Elena pulled out a tablet, showing live feeds from medical bay 2 floors below. Alexander lay unconscious on a surgical table while technicians worked to remove the neural implants that had made him believe he was someone else. "Choose quickly, darling," Elena said softly. "The procedure to restore Alexander's original personality is almost complete. In 10 minutes, he'll wake up as Marcus Webb, the CIA operative I recruited 20 years ago. He won't remember being Alexander Westmont, won't remember loving Maria, won't remember searching for a daughter he never had. But he'll remember you. He'll remember the woman who saved him from a meaningless life and gave him purpose." Elena's smile was radiant with triumph. "Just like you will, once you accept who you really are." Autumn stared at the terminal, at the virus that would destroy Elena's network but kill everyone she cared about, at the mission parameters that would make her complicit in the deaths of dozens of American agents. For 16 years, other people had made her choices for her. They'd decided who she would be, what she would believe, whom she would love. They'd engineered her genetics, programmed her psychology, and scripted her entire existence to serve their purposes. But this choice, this impossible, devastating choice between different kinds of destruction, was finally, genuinely hers to make. "I understand now," Autumn said quietly, her finger hovering over the activation key. "I understand what you've created, what you've sacrificed, what you're asking me to become." Elena leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. "And?" Autumn met her biological mother's gaze directly, seeing herself reflected in those cold, calculating eyes, but seeing also what she could choose not to become. "I choose to be someone you didn't plan for," she said, and pressed the key. The virus uploaded with devastating efficiency, sending corrupted data cascading through Elena's network like digital wildfire. Alarms began blaring throughout the command center as technicians scrambled to contain damage that was already beyond containment. But as the screens around them went dark one by one, Autumn realized that her choice had been just another manipulation. Elena was smiling. "Did you really think," Elena said as the alarms wailed around them, "that after 20 years of planning, I wouldn't anticipate my daughter's dramatic gesture of rebellion?" The command center screens flickered back to life one by one, showing not system failures but system activations. Instead of destroying Elena's network, the virus had awakened something far more extensive, a backup system that revealed the true scope of what they were dealing with. "The virus you just uploaded," Elena continued, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a chess master revealing checkmate, "wasn't designed to destroy my network. It was designed to activate it. Every Prometheus asset worldwide just received their final programming update. The monitors now displayed dozens of locations across the globe, government buildings, military installations, corporate headquarters, news stations. In each location, people who looked ordinary, unremarkable, were suddenly moving with coordinated precision toward critical objectives. Sleeper agents, Autumn breathed, watching the synchronized chaos unfold across 6 continents. Prometheus assets, Elena corrected. People like you, like Alexander, like David, except they've already accepted their true purpose. You just gave them the signal to begin the final phase." Autumn stared at the screens in horror. "What final phase?" "The end of the old world," Elena said simply. "In 6 hours, every major government will be paralyzed by simultaneous intelligence breaches. Military communications will be compromised. Financial systems will be vulnerable. The entire infrastructure of modern civilization will be at my mercy." She gestured to a map showing the global scope of the operation. "I didn't build a criminal network, Autumn. I built the framework for a new world order. And you just helped me activate it. But as Autumn watched the coordinated movements on the screens, she noticed something Elena hadn't anticipated. In several locations, the Prometheus assets weren't following their programming. They were hesitating, looking confused, some of them actually fighting against their handlers. "Something's wrong with your perfect plan," Autumn observed, pointing to a feed from London where a young man who looked remarkably like David was arguing with his control team instead of following orders. Elena's smile faltered as she turned to look at the monitors more carefully. "Minor glitches. The programming occasionally requires." "It's not a glitch," Autumn interrupted, understanding flooding through her like ice water. "When I uploaded the virus, it didn't just activate your network. It also transmitted something else, the truth about what they are." Elena spun to stare at the central computer terminal, where lines of code were still scrolling across the screen. But these weren't the virus commands Madison had given Autumn. These were something else entirely. "You modified the virus," Elena said, her voice carrying the first note of genuine alarm Autumn had ever heard from her. "I didn't modify anything," Autumn replied, but even as she spoke, she realized that wasn't entirely true. While accessing Elena's files, while learning the truth about Alexander and David and Madison, something inside her had changed. The programming that had made her compliant, that had made her accept manipulation as normal, had begun to break down. And apparently, that breakdown had affected the virus in ways none of them had anticipated. "Emotional resonance cascade," Elena whispered, her face going pale as she understood what was happening. "The virus is carrying your psychological state, your moment of awakening, and transmitting it to every asset in the network." On the monitors, more Prometheus assets were stopping mid-mission, some of them collapsing as conflicting programming warred in their minds, others turning on their handlers with expressions of rage and betrayal. "You're freeing them," Elena said, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and horror. "You're undoing 20 years of conditioning with a single moment of authentic choice." But the revelation came with a terrible cost. As the assets around the world began breaking their programming, many of them were also breaking psychologically. Screens showed people screaming, convulsing, some of them simply collapsing as their minds tried to reconcile conflicting identities. "They're dying," Autumn realized with horror. "The psychological damage from breaking the conditioning, it's killing them." "Not all of them," Elena said grimly, pointing to feeds where some assets were managing the transition, supported by handlers who were themselves beginning to question their orders. "The stronger ones, the ones who maintain some core sense of self despite the programming, they might survive." As if summoned by her words, the door to the command center burst open. David stumbled in, his face bloody but his eyes clearer than Autumn had ever seen them. Behind him came Madison, supporting Alexander, not the drugged, confused man from the medical bay, but someone who moved with purposeful determination. "The virus worked," David gasped, clutching his head as if fighting off a massive headache. "I remember now. I remember who I was before they made me into someone else." "David Chen," Madison added, her own voice strained but determined. "You're Detective Chen's son. Your father died investigating this operation, and they took you when you were 12. Made you forget everything, gave you false memories of being Alexander's son." Alexander, or whoever he really was, stepped forward with steady purpose. "Marcus Webb, CIA Deep Cover Specialist. I was investigating Elena's network when she captured me, turned me into Alexander Westmont to provide cover for her operations. But the conditioning is breaking down now. I remember my real mission." Elena backed away from them, her confidence finally cracking. "This is impossible. The programming can't be reversed without killing the subject. I designed it specifically to." "You designed it to break people's connection to their authentic selves," Alexander interrupted, his voice carrying authority that the confused billionaire persona had never possessed. "But you couldn't eliminate that connection entirely. You could only bury it." And Autumn's choice, Her genuine, autonomous choice to risk everything for others, created a resonance that reminded us who we really are. Autumn looked around at these three people who had been her family, her enemies, her handlers, her protectors, and realized she was seeing their true faces for the first time. Not the programmed personas Elena had created, but the authentic people they'd been before their capture. "So who am I really?" she asked, the question that had been haunting her since this nightmare began. Elena laughed bitterly. "You're my daughter. That part was never a lie. Born Autumn Morrison to Senator Morrison and Dr. Elena Morrison, yes, I was Elena Morrison before I became Elena Enrique Smith, before I became Maria Westmont, before I became whoever the operation needed me to be. But unlike the others," Alexander added gently, "you were never fully programmed. Elena wanted to preserve your natural development, your authentic personality, so she could study the difference between manufactured assets and organic ones. I was an experiment." "You were hope," David said, stepping closer despite the obvious pain the psychological transition was causing him. Elena thought she could create the perfect balance, someone with natural empathy and authentic emotions, but loyal to her vision. She never realized that authentic empathy would make you reject everything she stood for. The alarms had stopped, and the command center fell into an eerie quiet. Around the world, Elena's network was collapsing as assets broke their conditioning or simply walked away from their missions. 20 years of planning, manipulation, and control were unraveling in real time. "It's over," Madison said softly, looking at Elena with something that might have been pity. "The network is gone. The assets are free. The operations are terminated." But Elena shook her head, pulling out a device that looked like a modified smartphone. "No. If I can't control the future, then no one can." The device's screen showed a countdown timer: 5:43. 5:42, 5:41. "Dead man's switch," Elena explained with calm satisfaction. "Linked to explosive devices in 37 government buildings across the globe. If I can't have my new world order, I'll make sure the old world dies with me." Autumn felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. Save the world by stopping Elena, but lose the only biological family she'd ever known. Or let thousands of innocent people die to preserve the complex, damaged woman who'd given her life. But as she looked at Elena, really looked at her, seeing past the manipulation and cruelty to the brilliant, broken person underneath, Autumn realized there might be a third option. "Mom," she said quietly, the word carrying more power than any weapon. "You're right. The old world is broken. But destroying it won't create something better. It'll just create more pain, more loss, more children growing up without families like I did." Elena's finger hovered over the detonation button, but for the first time in 16 years, she hesitated. "Help us build something better," Autumn continued, stepping closer despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. "Not through control or manipulation or fear, but through choice. Real choice. The kind you never gave yourself." "You don't understand," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've done terrible things. Unforgivable things. I destroyed lives, murdered innocents, turned children into weapons. There's no redemption for someone like me." "There's redemption for anyone willing to choose it," Autumn replied, reaching out to touch her mother's hand. "But only if you choose it yourself. Really choose it, not because it serves some larger plan, but because it's who you want to become." Elena stared at her daughter, this impossible child who'd somehow retained her humanity despite everything Elena had done to her, and for a moment, she looked like just another broken person desperate for forgiveness. The timer continued counting down: 2:17. 2:16, 2:15. "I don't know how," Elena admitted, her voice breaking completely. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I've become." "Start by making one authentic choice," Autumn said gently. Choose to save the people you've spent your life trying to control. Elena looked at the device in her hand, at the timer counting down toward mass destruction, at the daughter she tried to mold into her own image but who'd somehow become something infinitely better. I choose you, she whispered, and pressed the abort sequence. The timer stopped with 37 seconds remaining, and Elena Morrison, the woman who'd hidden behind dozens of identities and elaborate schemes, finally chose to become the mother her daughter had always needed her to be. As the command center fell silent around them, Autumn realized that her expulsion from Westmont Preparatory Academy had led to something she'd never expected, not just discovering her identity, but choosing it. And in that choice, she'd found the strength to save not just herself, but everyone. 6 months later, Autumn Martinez Morrison stood in the doorway of Westmont Preparatory Academy's advanced chemistry classroom, watching Mr. Henderson, the real Mr. Henderson, not Elena's programming, explain molecular bonding to a group of students who had no idea their teacher was still recovering from 16 years of psychological conditioning. The man who'd once been her handler now struggled with basic lesson plans, but his genuine desire to help young people learn was authentic in a way his previous persona had never been. Elena's network had been built on lies, but the people trapped within it were finding ways to rebuild their lives with truth. Miss Morrison. The current principal, Dr. Sarah Kim, appeared beside her in the hallway. Are you ready for this? Autumn nodded, adjusting the tablet in her hands. Today marked the launch of the Phoenix Foundation, a non-profit organization designed to help victims of psychological manipulation and human trafficking rebuild their identities and lives. As the Foundation's youngest board member and primary advocate, Autumn would be speaking to students about recognizing and resisting manipulation in all its forms. It felt appropriate that her first presentation would be here, in the place where her old life had ended and her real one had begun. The students are excited to meet you, Dr. Kim continued as they walked toward the auditorium. Many of them followed your story in the news. You've become something of a symbol for standing up to authority when authority is wrong. Autumn smiled at that. The official story released to the media had been carefully sanitized, a brilliant student uncovering corruption at her school, leading to the exposure of an international conspiracy. The full truth about Prometheus assets and psychological programming remained classified, but enough had been revealed to make her something of a celebrity among teenagers who felt powerless against adult systems. The auditorium was packed, and Autumn felt a familiar flutter of nervousness as she approached the podium. But unlike the terrified girl who'd once stood in this very room being humiliated for the mud on her clothes, she knew exactly who she was now and what she stood for. 6 months ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room, I was expelled from this school for looking dirty. My principal told me I didn't belong here, that some people are born for greatness and others. She paused, seeing recognition in several faces. Others are meant to know their place. A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew the story, but hearing it from her directly felt different. What I learned afterward, Autumn continued, is that the person who expelled me was someone who'd spent her entire life letting other people define who she was supposed to be. She'd accepted so much manipulation, so much control, that she could only relate to others through power and domination. In the third row, she spotted David Chen, back to using his original name, who was auditing classes as part of his recovery program. Beside him sat Madison Chen, his actual cousin, who was working with federal authorities to identify and help other Prometheus survivors. They'd both struggled with memory gaps and identity confusion, but they were healing together, building authentic relationships based on choice rather than programming. The most important thing I learned, Autumn said, her voice growing stronger, is that no one else gets to decide who you are. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your government, not anyone. Your identity is something you discover and choose for yourself, every single day. After the presentation, Autumn found herself in the school's memorial garden, a new addition that honored victims of violence and manipulation. A small plaque near the center bore Rosa Martinez's name, along with dozens of others who died protecting the innocent from Elena's network. She would have been proud, a familiar voice said behind her. Autumn turned to find Alexander Westmont. He'd chosen to keep the name, even after remembering his original identity as Marcus Webb. The billionaire persona had been fake, but the charitable work and the search for meaning had been real. Now he was using his resources and his unique understanding of manipulation to support survivors worldwide. "I think about her every day," Autumn admitted, touching the small compass rose pendant she wore, a gift from Alexander, inscribed with coordinates that led not to any location, but to the concept of true north as a metaphor for authentic choice. "She knew this day would come," Alexander said gently. "Rosa always believed you'd find your way to who you really are, regardless of Elena's plans." Speaking of Elena, Autumn left the question hanging. "The rehabilitation facility reports she's making progress," Alexander replied carefully. "Undoing 20 years of self-programming is as difficult as undoing what she did to others. But she's chosen to do the work." Elena Morrison was serving her sentence in a specialized facility that combined incarceration with intensive psychological therapy. She'd pled guilty to dozens of charges in exchange for providing information that helped free remaining Prometheus assets worldwide. Her cooperation had saved lives, but her path to genuine redemption would take years, if it was possible at all. "Does she ask about me?" "Every day. And every day, the doctors tell her the same thing, that healing has to come from within before she can hope to repair relationships with others." Autumn nodded, understanding the complexity of loving someone who'd caused so much harm. Elena was her biological mother, but Rosa had been her real parent. Alexander was her chosen father, not through genetics or manipulation, but through mutual care and respect. "There's something else," Alexander said, pulling out an envelope. "This arrived yesterday." The letter was handwritten, the penmanship careful and measured. "Autumn. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness or your time. I know the damage I've caused to you, to everyone I claim to care about, may be irreparable. But I wanted you to know that every day in here, I practice making one authentic choice. Yesterday, I chose to help another patient work through her memories of her real family. Today, I chose to write this letter without expecting a response, You saved me by showing me what genuine love looks like, love that wants the best for someone else even when it costs you everything. I'm trying to learn that kind of love now. It's harder than anything I've ever done, Whatever you choose for your future, know that your mother, your real mother, not the woman who programmed and manipulated you, is proud of who you've become despite everything I did to prevent it. With love I'm still learning to mean. Elena." Autumn folded the letter carefully, feeling the weight of complex emotions. Forgiveness wasn't something that could be rushed or demanded, but it was something that could be chosen, one day at a time. "Are you going to respond?" Alexander asked. "Someday," Autumn said. "When I'm ready. When she's ready. When we're both sure it's coming from the right place." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the memorial garden in shades of gold and rose. Around the world, other Prometheus survivors were having similar moments, choosing their identities, rebuilding their relationships, learning to trust their own judgment after years of programmed compliance. "What's next for you?" Alexander asked as they prepared to leave. Autumn smiled, pulling out her acceptance letter from Georgetown University, where she'd been admitted on her own merits rather than through any foundation or scholarship tied to Elena's manipulations. College. Psychology major, with a focus on helping trauma survivors reclaim their identities. Following in your parents' footsteps, both sets of them. Rosa would approve. "What about you? Still planning to run Westmont Technologies?" "Actually," Alexander said with a grin that was pure Marcus Webb, "I'm thinking about becoming a teacher. Turns out I like helping people learn who they really are." As they walked back toward the school building, Autumn caught sight of someone waiting by the main entrance. It was Dr. Elena Morrison, not the cold manipulator or the broken patient, but a woman who looked like she was genuinely trying to become someone new. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying none of its old commanding authority. "I know I don't have the right to see you." "You don't," Autumn agreed simply. "But I have the right to choose to see you." They stood facing each other in the gathering twilight, daughter and mother, victim and perpetrator, the person who'd chosen authenticity and the person still learning what that meant. "I'm not ready to forgive you," Autumn said, her voice steady but not unkind. "I may never be ready. But I'm willing to let you try to earn it, one authentic choice at a time." Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. That's more grace than I deserve." "Grace isn't about deserving," Autumn replied, thinking of Rosa's lessons about love and choice and the difference between justice and mercy. "Grace is about choosing to see possibility in people, even when they can't see it in themselves." As Elena's escort, a federal marshal who doubled as a therapeutic supervisor, led her back to the transport vehicle, Autumn realized her story had come full circle. 6 months ago, she'd been expelled from this school for not meeting someone else's standards. Tonight, she was choosing her own standards and discovering that they were higher and more demanding than anything Elena had ever imposed. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Phoenix Foundation got 3 more referrals today. Word is spreading that there's help for people recovering from psychological manipulation." Another text, from Madison, "Starting my criminal justice degree next month. Gonna catch the people who do what Elena did before they destroy more families." And a final message from a number she didn't recognize, "Saw your presentation online. I think I might be like you, someone who was programmed but is starting to remember. Can you help?" Autumn smiled, typing back, "Yes. We can help. You're not alone anymore." Walking away from Westmont Preparatory Academy for what might be the last time, Autumn reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd started as a poor scholarship student desperate to prove she belonged. She'd discovered she was the daughter of 2 powerful people who tried to use her for their own purposes. And she'd chosen to become something neither poverty nor privilege had predetermined, a person who helped others choose themselves. The girl who'd been expelled for looking dirty had become a young woman who'd learned that true cleanliness came from washing away the lies others told you about who you were supposed to be. As she walked toward her future, uncertain but authentic, challenging but chosen, Autumn realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to be the weapon someone else had made you to be. Sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply choosing to be genuinely yourself. In her pocket, Rosa's compass rose pendant pointed not toward magnetic north, but toward something far more valuable, the direction of her own authentic choosing. And for the first time in her life, Autumn Morrison knew exactly who she was and where she was going. She was going home, not to any place, but to herself. What did this story teach you about the power of authentic choice in the face of manipulation and control? Autumn's journey from expelled student to empowered young woman shows us that our true identity isn't determined by our circumstances, our genetics, or even the people who claim to love us. It's determined by the choices we make when everything is on the line. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.